for forgiveness and the importance of it. This second part then begins with the practical matter of how do we seek forgiveness when we've done something wrong. And the third part tomorrow will speak about how do we get ourselves to forgive when someone has wronged us. Okay, so this is the structure. We're now in part 2. And with this one, I want to leave sufficient time at the end for questions. So I'm hoping that I can get through the content here in about an hour and a half, 6:30, and then we have 30 minutes for discussion, questions, comments, thoughts, experiences. I know several people had thoughts and questions during the break, but we weren't able to get to them. So hopefully there'll be time at this point. Okay. So saying sorry, we know, can be one of the most powerful things in any relationship. Our relationship with Krishna, our relationship with family members, our relationship with friends, and our relationships in the devotee community. And yet, we often hear how sorry can also be really cheap. Right? It can be very easy to say it and not mean it. And so what I want to talk about now is what are the ingredients of a genuine apology? What are the steps that we can take for a genuine apology? And there's 4 steps that I want to talk about specifically that are extracted from these many examples of apologies that we've mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. But before we get there, the first question to ask, just as a preamble, is how do we know when we've done something wrong that requires apology? Sometimes it's really obvious, and at other times it's not. And so how do we know? And I think there's 2 answers to this. One is external and the other is internal. Externally, the devotees will tell us if we've done something wrong that requires apology. Sometimes the person themselves will let us know by saying something or by change in behavior or mood towards us. But other times, our friends, well-wishers, mentors, will tell us as well. And here, especially, family can be very helpful. If we have a good relationship at home, then often our husband or our wife will tell us that, what you were saying, what you said to that person or how you behaved, that wasn't, I don't think they appreciated that. Maybe you should go back and say something to them, or maybe we need to fix this. And it can, because it's very difficult often to see immediately our own flaws. I don't know if you've experienced that, but I haven't. Where it's very difficult to tell that I am wrong in a situation. We're so close to something that we don't see it, right? Just like, if you ask me what's written on this page, I could tell you, I could read it out. But if you ask me now, I can't, right? I don't know what's written on the page because I'm too close to it. And so often when we do something wrong or we make a mistake, we're so close to the situation that we're unable to see it for what it is. And so this is where it's really helpful to ask someone who's a little removed from that immediate emotional context or whatever the situation was. And they will often tell us, or we sometimes need to ask them. So that's very helpful. And internally, so externally, the devotee community, but also family and friends we can rely upon. Internally, the Lord will tell us in the heart. And we often call this conscience, we often call it intuition, but all of us have it. And to some degree or another, we can feel it when we've done something that requires forgiveness. that requires us to seek forgiveness, we feel that in our hearts. And we discuss this in the case of Maharaj Ambarish and Durvasa Muni, right? That Durvasa Muni's experience is actually replicated in our own hearts by the super soul, the voice of the Lord within the heart that tells us. So internally or externally, Krishna always lets a devotee know when there's room for improvement. And this is his special favor towards a devotee. In general, Krishna lets us do what we want with our lives. And when we want to make a mess of it, we learn through the reactions we get in karma that we ought not to behave in certain ways. But Krishna doesn't let the rather slow and impersonal process of karma reform a devotee. He's much more eager. He's much too eager to allow that slow process to work. And so he often will let a devotee know much faster and much more immediately that something needs to change, that something needs to be effective, that we need to do something about it. And that's his special favor towards a devotee. And sometimes as devotees, we often feel that why is it that there's so much of this in my life? Everyone else seems to be going about their business just fine. People do all kinds of nasty things to each other and then go home and have a good meal and go to bed. And I still have to deal with this, right, for so long and over again. And it's often nice to see this not as a problem, but as a favor from Krishna. That he doesn't let a devotee's problems be swept under the rug. He's too eager to see us improve and to see us advance. And so he really tries hard to bring this to the forefront and give us opportunities to reform. So, internally or externally, Krishna will let us know one way or the other. He ensures that. And it's up to us to take the opportunity to hear that message when Krishna sends it our way, that something needs to be reformed, that we need to seek forgiveness. So that's one point as a preamble. The second point I wanted to make is that sometimes we need to apologize for things that we didn't do, or we didn't entirely do. Remember the Jai and Vijay story, the big takeaway there was that in any situation that requires us to seek forgiveness, there's probably other people at fault as well. The person, in fact, we're seeking forgiveness from is likely just as much at fault as we are, because these situations work in that way. They're complex, and there's not a clear, that's the good guy and there's the bad guy. This is one thing you find throughout Bhagavatam and, in fact, Mahabharata and Ramayana stories, that it's very difficult to identify the good guy and the bad guy absolutely, right? We know the Pandavas are the good guys. We know the Kauravas are the bad guys. And yet, Duryodhana was one of the most loyal and upright and generous people that we know. I mean, the way that he treated Karna was very righteous. And Karna, who stood by his side, is one of the most generous people we know, right? And Yudhishthira had his flaws, even though he was Dharmaraj. He had his weakness, particularly for gambling. So you always find that there's never like a black and white in throughout Bhagavatam. It's very difficult actually to find a pure black and white scenario where there's, sometimes you do, but usually not. And so, like in the Jai and Vijay instance, sometimes we have to apologize in a situation where we don't feel we're entirely at fault, or we feel that that person was more at fault than we are, or we have to apologize for things that were not intentional. So there were the unexpected effects of behavior that was actually good and that was righteous, but it had a knock-off effect or knock-on effect that wasn't that we didn't intend and wasn't meant to happen. Sometimes we have to apologize for more than our share of any situation, and that can be difficult because it can feel unfair. But I think one thing that we find when we engage in the process of seeking forgiveness is that the relief that comes from being able to surrender our ego and to relieve ourselves of that wrong that we carry, to relieve ourselves of that guilt that we carry, of the pain that's associated with it, to open ourselves up again, because as I was saying before, like with Durvasa Muni, we tend to, when we're not able to accept our responsibility in a situation, we tend to harden ourselves. We tend to block ourselves off from the world to protect ourselves from that feeling, from the jabs of the Sudarshan Chakra, the jabs of the Super Soul in the heart. We harden ourselves to avoid that. And to harden ourselves is actually, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort to hold that. And when we let go and we accept responsibility and we seek forgiveness, we find that even if we ended up having to accept more than our fair share, or even if it was one way, we accepted our responsibility and they didn't on their end, it's still worthwhile. Because we are in a better place in our relationship with Krishna. Because I think it's important to remember that in any situation between two people, there's always a third person, and that's the Lord, right? He's always present in any relationship. He's always there. And we have to be concerned not just about our relationship with this person, but our relationship with Krishna. And in the end, if we are able to do what is right, to be generous and to give, to surrender our ego, to seek forgiveness, and because of that, our relationship with Krishna is stronger and more personal and more vibrant, we are the ones who are winning. We are the ones who have won. There's no loss in that. Right? So, the process of forgiveness always makes us stronger. It never makes us weaker to seek forgiveness, even though it feels like that initially. And we'll talk about some of the fear associated with seeking forgiveness a little bit later, soon. But I think it's important to remember at this point that the process of seeking forgiveness always makes us stronger. It makes us better as human beings, and it makes us stronger because it connects us more closely with Krishna. The last thing, the third thing in the preamble, before we get into the specific steps, is that it's always best to do it quickly, to do it as soon as we can, to seek forgiveness at the earliest opportunity. Now, by the earliest opportunity, I mean sometimes it takes us time to be in a state of mind where we have the courage, the humility, the support that we need to seek forgiveness. And that takes it can take some time. It almost always does. To accept, to recognize our responsibility in a situation and to help remedy it. But as soon as we are in that place, it's best not to delay for any kind of superficial reasons, such as it's really awkward, or I don't know of a good time, or how should I say it, or anyway, they're going to India, so I'll talk to them when they get back. The more that we wait, if we have to wait because we're not ready, that's one thing. But if we're waiting for superficial reasons, the longer we wait, the more it festers, the worse it gets, and the greater the problem becomes, the greater the apology that's needed. And again, with Jain Vijay, the key point that Prabhupada highlights there was Jain Vijay's swiftness in seeking apology. Right? It was so fast, so quick, and that's part of what protected them from something that could have been much worse. So those three things, right? How do we know apologizing even when we're not entirely at fault, or we feel like we're apologizing for something that doesn't need to, or we need to apologize too many times. And thirdly, to not wait in doing it. So, if we look at the different instances of seeking forgiveness in Srimad Bhagavatam, we find a certain pattern emerges. Over and over again, devotees do certain things when they need to seek forgiveness from other devotees or from the Lord. And these involve 4 different steps, or different stages to that process of seeking forgiveness. The first is when we have committed wrong to someone and we understand, we know, we've been told, we understand within our hearts that something needs to be done. Usually, the biggest problem at that point is that our relationship with that person has been so damaged that we can't see anything good in them. There's been some spat, some problem. They've done something to hurt us. We've done something to hurt them. We have come to recognize that we had a share in that. And yet our view of them, our understanding of them, is so badly damaged that we can't see any good in them. And so the first step is to genuinely appreciate the person from whom we're seeking forgiveness. We see that whenever an apology is spoken, whether it's Daksha to Lord Shiva, or Indra to Krishna, or Brahma to Krishna, or Durvasa Muni to Ambarish, each time, even before they make the apology, even before the devotee says, "I'm sorry," they begin by offering genuine appreciation of the person to whom they're planning to apologize. That has a very powerful effect because it softens the soil in which the apology will be planted. It allows that person to receive what you're going to say and to accept it. Daksha offers beautiful prayers to Lord Shiva. Indra does the same to Krishna. Durvasa Muni glorifies the devotees of the Lord, and Ambarishan specifically, as being so dear to Krishna and having such wonderful qualities, and so on. The biggest obstacle to offering that genuine appreciation is, of course, our egos, is pride. And especially to humble ourselves before someone who we feel has also wronged us. We hear so much about humility throughout the Shastras, throughout the scriptures. And we hear it over and over again. And sometimes those descriptions of humility can feel so out of reach, so extraordinary, so idealistic, that they don't seem like they're applicable in the real world. So often we can feel, we can say even, that, humility is a good thing in an ideal context, maybe amongst devotees who already love each other. But in the real world, humility doesn't work. If I am humble at work, I'll just get crushed. If I'm humble in front of my colleagues, someone will just climb on top of me. Right? Humility doesn't actually work in the real world. And I think the thing to think about there is that usually when we think of humility as being impractical, it's because we're not thinking of humility. We're thinking of something else. Sometimes we mistake groveling for humility. If we get down and flatter someone to get something out of them, that's humility. Sometimes we confuse humility with low self-esteem. I'm worthless, and this person is so amazing. You're the best and I'm the worst. Right? None of that is humility. Think about this with me for a moment. What is the difference between humility and low self-esteem? What's the difference between being genuinely humble and thinking of oneself as worthless and incapable? What's the difference? Anyone? Yeah.
Low self-esteem still focuses on oneself, whereas humility means you have an accurate assessment of where everybody is, and then you just treat others in a selfless way. So one is selfish, whereas the other promotes selflessness.
Yeah, so one very important distinction, Prabhu is saying, is that low self-esteem is still focused on the individual, right? On ourselves. It's the other side of pride. It's not the opposite of pride, it's the accompaniment to pride. Right? It's the flip side of the same coin. Whereas pride says, look, I am the most important because I am the best. And look at me. Low self-esteem says, I am the worst. Look at me. There's no one as terrible as I am. Right? And I don't have this, and I am not able to do this, and I am not able to do that. It's both are a misjudge of who we are. Pride is a misjudge of who we are because we've inflated ourselves way past who we actually are, right? We may actually be this, good at this, and we think that we're like this, we're this amazing, right? I'm worthy of this much respect, but I think I'm actually worthy of that much respect. Whereas low self-esteem essentially says, I'm actually worthy of this much respect, but I rather think that I'm worthy of this. Right? I'm not worth this, because this is not who I am, I'm this. Both are a misconstrual of who we actually are. Humility, by its nature, begins with an honest assessment of our own selves and an honest assessment of others. Now, here's the clincher. If we make an honest assessment of others, we will always find something to appreciate, something good. If we make an honest assessment of ourselves, we will always find something worthy to appreciate, worthy of respect. We will always see what our capacity is. Just like, I like to give this example, when Jambavan is encouraging Hanuman to jump across the ocean, Hanuman's response is, I can't do this. I'm not the one. There's all these great monkeys. Who am I? I'm just Hanuman. I can't jump. He has a untrue assessment of who he is. When Jamban asks him, no, you can do this, Hanuman, jump across the ocean. Hanuman's willingness to jump is not a symptom of his pride. It's an honest assessment of his own capacity. Yes, I am capable of jumping across the ocean and jumping back. That is my ability, and I'm going to serve the Lord with it. Therefore, it's not pride. Initially, he had low self-esteem. His sense of self was deflated to a degree where it inhibited him from doing service, from doing seva. He could not serve Krishna the way, couldn't serve Ram the way that Lord Ram wanted him, because he had low self-esteem. But Jamvan reset that, and all of a sudden he's able to serve the Lord. And that service, him climbing to the top of that mountain and jumping across in a blaze of glory, literally, this he takes off, the Ramayana describes it. There's all these flowers and trees shake, and all their flowers come off and they follow him. He's like going off like a comet in the sky. Despite that blaze of glory, it's not pride. Because that's what he's meant to do for the Lord. That's his service. Even lifting a mountain is not pride for him. So if we do that honest assessment, we come to recognize that there's always something to appreciate about our capacity to serve Krishna. And also, there's always something to appreciate about someone else's capacity to serve Krishna. Even that person we dislike so much. And if we develop the habit of seeing that good quality or multiple qualities in others and offering genuine appreciation for it, humility not only becomes practical, but it becomes one of the most powerful capacities that we can have in our life, even in the big bad real world. At work, for example, if we offer genuine appreciation to someone for what they're doing, that will never make us smaller. That doesn't prompt someone to crush us. It prompts them to lift us up. They see us as a friend, we have a new partner, and all kinds of pathways open up for advancement. Okay, occasionally in this world you'll find someone who's truly cruel, who's truly a snake. And if you humble yourself before them, they'll just crush you. And they'll take advantage. But actually such people are pretty rare in this world. The natural response of a human being when they are appreciated is to offer that back. When we do manadena, the response from that person is also manadena. They say, oh, actually, thank you. That's so wonderful. You did this really well. I couldn't have done this without you. And that's the natural response. Amanina becomes very easy if we practice manadena. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's formula there, amanina manadena, kirtaniya sada. The easier place to begin is manadena, because that is allowing us to focus on someone else. Amanina is actually very challenging because we can confuse it, what it actually means. Right? We can confuse it for low self-esteem, we can confuse it for self-flagellation, we can do all kinds of things with it. But manadena, when done genuinely, is actually a very wonderful experience. And it makes amanina very easy, because when you give, you receive. You don't have to ask for mana. Amanina means not looking for others to respect us. But you don't have to look for others to respect us, to respect you when you're willing to give that respect to others. It comes naturally in our direction. So amanina, instead of becoming an experience where we crush ourselves into the ground, trying to make ourselves humble and not looking for respect, it actually becomes an experience where we don't need that respect, because it comes, because we are in the habit of giving it to others. But that appreciation, for it to be genuine, it has to have one quality, which is it has to be specific. We have to find something that is specific and accurate about that person, and we have to give it to them. Not a generic appreciation. Prabhu, you're wonderful. That's good. That's nice. Prasadam was excellent. That's also good. But something specific about that. Today, this sabji was particularly good. Was there like some special spice in it? Or I really liked how you did that particular melody in the kirtan. That was excellent. That beat on the mridanga was really good. The more specific we make it, the more targeted we make it. Why is it more effective like that? Because it signals to the person that you have actually been watching them, that you have actually been paying attention to them, that you have actually been respecting them, that it's not something cheap, it's not something generic, that it's actually real. So offering a specific form of appreciation is one of the simplest, most powerful acts of humility that we can do, that allows us to take that first step in terms of seeking forgiveness from a person. When you see all the prayers in Srimad Bhagavatam, this is one of their characteristic qualities. That the devotees are very specific in their appreciation of the Lord or of each other. This is why we have these beautiful descriptions of Krishna in Bhagavatam. There he stands with an arm on the shoulder of a friend, with the karnikara flower tucked in his ear, and he's playing with a lotus in his hand, and his other hand is holding a flute. And his earrings are shaped like sharks. Right? The reason we know this, that Krishna's earrings are shaped like sharks, is because when devotees appreciate Krishna, instead of just saying, Krishna, you look gorgeous today, they say, Krishna, your shark-shaped earrings are very beautiful. It's that flower that looks so pretty in your hands or in your ear. And what flower is it? It's a karnikara flower. Right? They actually named the type of, they noticed that. And to be noticed is the greatest form of appreciation. That's what everyone is looking for in this world, right? Is we want to be noticed. If you look at studies after studies after studies of what makes a good leader, the number one thing, actually, they did this study asking people what it is that they wanted from their leaders, from their managers. Do you know the number one thing that everyone said? Appreciation. Then they did a study asking managers and leaders what they wanted from their subordinates. You know the number one thing they all said? Appreciation. Everyone's looking for the same thing. Everyone's looking to be noticed. Whatever small contribution we might make, even a child, as parents, many of us here are parents, we know this, right? If you appreciate what a child is doing, recognize it, actually notice it, it makes their day, right? They bloom. Like, wow, amazing, something amazing has happened. So that's the first thing. The first step is offering genuine, specific appreciation for another person. So often we think this in our minds. We think that today this dish was really tasty. We think this kirtan was really good. We think this person was looking really nice, or this person did this really nice, or that play was really good. We think all these things, and then we don't say it. What a missed opportunity that is. What a terrible, terrible missed opportunity that is to give the easiest and yet most powerful form of a gift in this world is simply to notice someone else. So we find that when devotees seek forgiveness throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, before they even ask for an apology, the first thing they do is appreciate the person from whom they're seeking forgiveness. An appreciation that is specific, that is genuine, that is heartfelt. I forgot to mention, when that appreciation is specific, not only does it tell the person that you're noticing them, but it also precludes something important, which is that you're flattering them. Because a characteristic of flattery that's meant to use someone, is that it is generic and overblown. That's how we as human beings identify when praise is insincere. It's generic and it's overblown. This is why when we come, for example, to the demigods, to the devas, and we praise them as the Supreme Lord, you are all powerful, you are the greatest, this is why they don't take it as a compliment. In fact, we understand from Bhagavatam that it doesn't please them. It doesn't make them happy. It makes them upset because they know you're not actually talking about them.
They're like, who are you actually describing? Who is it? Have you even noticed me? Like, have you seen what I do? I don't create the universe. Right? My job is to give the reins. That's my job. So thank me for that. Not for, being Lord and Master of this creation. That's not who I am. And so it's not actually a favor. They don't appreciate it so much. They think you're mocking them. Or you're flattering them. One of the two. And neither one is very pleasant for anyone else. Right? So that's another advantage of specific appreciation, is that it helps that person recognize that you're not in it for something else. Because anyone who takes the time to actually just praise someone to their extent, who they actually are, you know that they actually are looking at you. So that's step number one, is offering genuine appreciation, cultivating that humility before we approach them. The second is the actual statement of apology. And here, a statement of apology has three parts to it. Okay? What makes a genuine statement of apology? That is not cheap. That is sincere. The first thing is that we specifically state our wrongdoing. What is it that we are apologizing for? When Indra comes to Krishna, he tells Krishna something that is really obvious, which is that I tried to destroy Vrindavan, and I'm sorry for that. Why state the obvious? I mean, that's what he did. Anyone can see that. Because when we state our reason for apology, what it is that we're apologizing for, it once again tells that person that we are being genuine, that we have thought about it. So often we hear in public circles people making apologies along the lines of, I am so sorry that you felt bad. I am so sorry for the misunderstanding. What does that apology say? I am apologizing for the fact that you have a problem. Your problem, I mean, this is like one of those typical political apologies, right? I'm so sorry that you felt bad. Where's the problem here? In you, right? You felt bad for something that truly you shouldn't have felt bad for. Because everyone knows that I didn't do anything wrong. Right? So to preclude that, we state what it is specifically that we're apologizing for. Daksha does this to Lord Shiva also. He says, my dear Lord, I made the mistake of insulting you in that assembly, in front of so many, and not recognizing who you actually are. And I'm sorry for that. Okay? So first, a specific statement of wrongdoing. Second, that we add no conditions or mitigations, ifs and buts to that apology. So often, we pick up the courage to make an apology. We surrender our ego. We put ourselves through so much to actually apologize. And then we lose the power of that apology because we surround it with all kinds of conditions, mitigations, ifs and buts. I'm apologizing for this and only this much, but not for this. And actually, it would have been good had you apologized for this. And we, in that circumstance, I was actually really stressed out. And so I really didn't have a choice but to do that. And we just covered up. And in all that explanation around it, the actual thing that we wanted to say that would heal the relationship
gets lost. It gets buried inside. And the person doesn't even hear it. They don't even read it. What they read is all the other excuses that we gave. All the ways in which we try to excuse ourselves from that. The only thing that we can add to that apology, that simple statement of, this is what I did wrong, and for that I'm sorry. The only thing we can add is a clarification of our intention. I did this, and it was wrong. Here's what I was actually intending to do. This is what I was intending to say. Clarification of intent helps protect the person who's apologizing, and also helps clarify why is it that that behavior happened. I actually was trying to say this to you, and it just, I ended up saying it like this. Or my goal was to do this, and instead I did this, and that was wrong. So in clarifying our intention, the reason for why we are doing something, without excusing ourselves, without saying, therefore it's okay, or therefore you overreacted, that helps that person understand where we're coming from. A wonderful example of this is in the story of Diti and Indra. This is one of the lesser known stories in Srimad Bhagavatam. Diti is at one point in her life really upset at the demigods, the devas, the children of her co-wife Aditi, because they're half-brothers. The demigods and the demons are half-brothers. The demigods are sons of Aditi and the demons of Diti. So Diti, she goes to Kashyapa, her husband, and says, Kashyapuni, and says, please give me a formula by which I can have a child who will kill Indra. And Kashyapa is really distressed at this request. But he's promised her that he had come to him and said, you have to give me what I want. And Kashyap said, sure, whatever you want. And when he hears this, he's really stuck. And so he tells Diti, he says, okay, I'll give you a formula. You perform this vrata, this vow, this sacrifice for for Vishnu. And if you do that, then you will have a child. You will get whatever it is that you desire. Okay? It will fulfill your desire. But keep in mind that if you make any mistake in the performance of this vrata, then you will get the opposite. You will have a child who is the friend of Indra rather than his enemy. So that's the challenge. Diti goes off to do it. She does a really good job, and she's very, very intense in her performance, making Indra very nervous because he knows that this is for a child to kill him. So he shows up, makes a farce of being Diti's well-wisher, and says, Auntie, I want to help you. If you're doing this vrata, I want to help you. And Diti actually, in a lot of generosity, says, yes, you can help me. And so he stays there with Diti to assist her, to serve her, all the while waiting for that one moment when she makes a slip up. And sure enough, it happens. She becomes thinner and thinner and more emaciated from all the fasting, and she's exhausted. And one day, after taking her evening meal, she goes to bed without washing her hands and mouth. And that's a flaw in the performance. And right away, Indra enters her womb and finds that opportunity, that weakness, and tries to kill the child that is there. He slices the child into 7 pieces to kill it. And instead of killing the child, there's that one child becomes 7. And they all start crying out and saying, Indra, don't do this to us. We're your friends. And Indra panics and cuts each one into another 7 pieces. Now there's 49 babies. And they're all crying and saying, Indra, please, we're your friends. Don't you understand? We are the Maruts. We are going to be your companions. And Indra finally recognizes what he's doing and stops. And when he emerges, Diti at this point knows what is it that's been going on. And Indra, by the process of assisting Diti every day, his heart changes through that service. And he apologizes to Diti and says, my dear aunt, I have to admit, I was not here to assist you at all. My intention was to kill the child that was in your womb. And I'm very sorry for that. And Diti, at that point, says, Indra, I have to say my intentions weren't great either. I'm doing this whole vrata to get a child to kill you. And both clarify their intentions. And Prabhupada has a very nice line in the purport. He says, when Diti, Indra's aunt, this is in the 6th canto of Bhagavatam, when Diti, Indra's aunt, explained to Indra without reservations what she had wanted to do, Indra explained his intentions to her. Thus, both of them, instead of being enemies, freely spoke the truth. This is the qualification that results from contact with Vishnu. Because they were both engaged in service to Vishnu, Diti directly and Indra by serving Diti, they had the ability to clarify their intentions. When Diti, Indra's aunt, explained to Indra without reservations, and Indra explained to her, both of them, instead of becoming enemies, freely spoke the truth. This is the qualification that results with contact with Vishnu. So even as we make that apology, and even as it should be an unconditional apology, the one thing that we can add to it is a clarification of our intent. Perhaps that intent was terrible, or perhaps it's actually praiseworthy. Either way, it will help. Years ago, I had a situation where, as a student, I was in graduate school. I had a really tough relationship with someone else who was also a student with me in the same program. And this person was just at me and undermining me in so many situations, and arguments, unnecessary. It was like a really very difficult situation. And one day, things really came to a head, and I ended up going to him and saying, what's going on? What's the problem? What's the issue? Am I doing something wrong that I should be changing? Because if so, I'm willing to do that. Please tell me. But this won't work. And what that person did, it just floored me. He told me, I've thought about this a lot, and the reason I keep going at you, I think it's just because I'm jealous of you.
Wow.
And in that moment, when he explained his intention, the reason behind it, our relationship entirely changed. Far from thinking of him as a jealous, horrible person,
my respect for him just skyrocketed. I thought, wow. Like, I don't know if I would have the capacity to say that. I've experienced jealousy in my life, and I don't know if I would have the capacity to go to that person and say, you know, the issue in our relationship is my intention is a problem. I'm jealous of you. And to this day, we have a wonderful relationship, and I have a lot of respect for it because of just that simple thing, a clarification of intent. So clarification of intent doesn't mean defensiveness, necessarily. Sometimes the intention can genuinely be good on our part, and sometimes not. But clarification of intent can be powerful. Okay, so a statement of apology has three parts, right? A specific statement of our wrongdoing, what it is that we're apologizing for. Number two, no conditions or mitigations. We don't bury the apology in other things, except for a clarification of intention. And thirdly, a suggested remedy. I have done this wrong. How do we get beyond this? Maybe, Prabhu, would you like to come over to my home for dinner? Maybe we can let's regularly stay in touch again. Maybe I can call you once a week, just to talk about family or little things. Or I've harmed you in this way, maybe I can fix things. I can make recompense in this way. I can help you out, or I can. I insulted you in front of others. Maybe I can go talk to them and tell them that I was wrong and I shouldn't have done that. But I actually appreciate you as a person. The third part is saying, okay, what's next? Right? Making some recompense, making some suggested solution. Because otherwise it just stays on the level of words. And a person can genuinely feel that words are cheap, that this was just lip service. But when it's grounded in a way forward, how do we move ahead? Now they may or may not accept, right? And we'll talk about that in a minute. But providing some suggestion, how we are willing to move ahead becomes crucial. Okay, so 4 steps to seeking forgiveness. The first meaning is offering genuine, specific appreciation for that other person, creating a sense of humility in ourselves. Secondly, to offering apology, making the statement of apology. That needs to be a specific statement of wrongdoing, without conditions, except clarification of intent, and some suggested remedy forward. The third step is feeling a genuine sense of remorse for what we've done. Now, surprisingly, the previous step and this one are not the same thing. It is entirely possible, in fact quite frequent, that we can make an apology and not feel any sense of remorse for it. Why? Well, I did do something wrong, but I was really stressed out that day, and I had really no choice. Or I did do something wrong, but I was forced by circumstance to do it. So, really, I did something wrong, but they really overreacted, didn't they? I did something wrong, but really they did something even more wrong, so my response was appropriate. Or, I did something wrong, but I have a right to speak like that, or to do that, because I'm their senior. Or, I'm in a position that allows me to do it. Or I'm a family member and therefore it's okay. Or so many other reasons that we can give to internally justify a behavior for which we externally apologize. As human beings, our capacity for self-justification
is powerful. It's really endless. And we can find every reason to recognize a mistake and yet let ourselves off the hook. Feeling that sense of remorse is what purifies us inside so that the consciousness that produced the mistake is destroyed at its root. So that that kind of behavior doesn't happen again. Prabhupada discusses this very nicely in the story of Parikshit Maharaj and Shringi and his father, Shamikrishi. You may know this. When Maharaj Parikshit went to the forest on a hunting trip, he was at one point very thirsty and very hungry. And he walked up to the hermitage of a sage named Shamikrishi and came there asking for water. And the sage did not respond because he was in deep meditation, in deep samadhi, unaware of his external surroundings. But Maharaj Parikshit didn't recognize that. He thought that the sage was ignoring him and being rude and finding an excuse, a pretense for not receiving him. And so in anger, as he was leaving his home, his ashram, he saw a dead snake outside. And in anger, he picked it up and put it around his neck, the sage's neck. And his son, Shamikrishi's son, is named Shringi, a little boy. I don't know how old, 6, 7 years old. He was playing with his friends somewhere else. But because he was powerful, even as a child, he was powerful. He could understand, he could see that someone had insulted his father. And so without stopping to think or recognize what had happened, he immediately uttered a curse against the king. A curse for him to die in 7 days. In fact, he has a litany of curses, some powerful and some just curses. He's just speaking in foul language. He's saying, these kshatriyas are nothing better than dogs who eat the scraps from the table of the Brahmins. They know nothing. They exist because of us. And today, they have the arrogance to dine at the master's table. Let me show them who they actually are. And he says, this person will die. 7 days from now, the person who did this will die. When he comes back to the ashram of his father, he starts crying really loudly. And his father opens his eyes, asks his son why he's crying, and understands what has happened. And immediately he cries out, oh, what a terrible thing you have done in your immaturity. Such a righteous king for such a small insult. And now the world will be bereft of good leadership. Prabhupada explains that in this story, every one of the actors felt a sense of remorse after the things play out. Shamikrishi feels terrible about the fact that his son ended up giving such a terrible punishment to such an innocent crime. Such a tiny little thing. Maharaj Parikshit, when he goes home, feels terrible for what he has done and knows that there's going to be a reaction and says, whatever comes of it, I will accept it. And Shringi, it's very nice actually, that purport. Prabhupada says, when Shringi cries before his father, it is because he too is pained in his heart for what he has done. When children do something wrong, it's often difficult for them to articulate, to say what it is, why it is that they're feeling whatever it is they're feeling. So they can't really say,
well, I did something wrong today and it went like this and so on. So he's just crying. And Prabhupada says this crying is a sign that there is remorse, that there's pain. And Prabhupada writes in one purport, he says, about Parikshit, he says, the pious king regretted his accidental, improper treatment of the powerful Brahmin, who was faultless. Such repentance is natural for a good man like the king, and such repentance delivers a devotee from all kinds of sins accidentally committed. The devotees are naturally faultless. Accidental sins committed by a devotee are sincerely regretted, and by the grace of the Lord, all sins unwillingly committed by a devotee are burnt in the fire of repentance. That's such a beautiful phrase, no? By the grace of the Lord, all sins unwillingly committed by a devotee are burnt in the fire of repentance. When we have that heart of repentance, Krishna takes that so seriously. He appreciates it so much that it kills, that fire kills not only the sin, but the consciousness that produced that misbehavior to begin with. And that is the most important reason for seeking forgiveness. Because of the purification it creates in our own hearts. When we burn away that sinful mentality, we have advanced. We have grown as a devotee. We have advanced in our relationship with Krishna. And that's why the process is all worth it. Because we have become better as a person. They may accept our apology, they may not. But by the very power of remorse and repentance, we have helped ourselves. Okay. So, appreciating the other person, making a genuine apology, which 3 sub-steps. Then feeling remorseful, a sense of repentance for what we have done wrong. And finally, a commitment to change our behavior. A commitment to ourselves, a commitment to another, yes, this is the 4th. A commitment to change our behavior. When Jagai and Madhai beg forgiveness from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu for what they have done to Lord Nityananda and to so many others, the Lord, of course, forgives them. We talked about the quality of his character in the earlier part of the seminar. But there's one thing he asks of them. The only thing he asks is, from here on out, don't do it again. Don't behave like this. From here on out, when Prabhupada used to give Diksha to his devotees, initiation to his disciples, whatever their backgrounds, so many of them, like us, had done so much terrible things before initiation. But he said, from this point onward, you have to promise that your life will be different. It will be free of that behavior. Okay. So, 4 steps. Genuine appreciation, a specific statement of apology, a sense of deep remorse, and a commitment to change. The last thing. As I mentioned in the first part, one of the biggest challenges to seeking forgiveness is fear. Fear on many different levels.
when we take the risk of humbling ourselves before another person, of taking blame upon ourselves, not just in front of any person, but in front of a person who is likely to be angry at us. Right? I mean, that's why we're asking sorry. It's because we've done something wrong in connection to someone. And that person has been wronged, and I'm sure they feel wronged, and therefore there's often a lot of anger there, resentment. What's going to happen when I do that? Will they embrace my apology and embrace me and say, all's good, let's go on? Maybe. But actually that's rare. It's really rare for a person to forgive like Mahaprabhu forgave Jagannatha. To embrace them and to say, all's well. Like Krishna forgave Indra. Go on and be king of heaven again. It's okay. That's actually a very rare thing. And tomorrow we'll talk about how we get there, right? How we actually forgive and we get to that point. But for this moment, we're thinking in terms of the person who's seeking forgiveness. So often we seek forgiveness and that person is not willing to forgive. They're like, no way, I don't want to see you. Get out of here. Or, yeah, that's cheap. Or the words come cheap. Or, let's see. Or, this is too little, too late. Or, they do worse. They take our moment of being down on the ground to crush us, and to step upon us, to walk all over us, and to tell us how terrible we are. We worry that they might use that opportunity to broadcast to the world. You know, I was right. I told you I was right. Did you know he came to me and apologized? He took responsibility. I knew it. What if they misuse our apology? There can be fear at a lot of levels. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Vita, Raga, Bhaya, Krodha. The three biggest things, are challenges in this world, are attachment, fear, and anger. Tomorrow we're going to talk about anger and how it prevents our ability to forgive and what we can do that. Today, we talked about pride. And pride is just another form of attachment. Right? It's attachment to our egos. Right? And we talked about how we can work on that humility in a genuine, in a specific way. But this third one, bhaya, or fear, it's at the heart of this process and one of its biggest obstacles. And this is why in situations where things are particularly difficult, not for little apologies, that we do regularly, and we should be able to do those with some courage and confidence. Right? Not the day-to-day things that crop up in our relationships, husband and wife, and friends and family, and fellow devotees. Right? So some things come up, we apologize and they accept, that's okay. But sometimes when the situation is a little more intense, it's deeper, then to avoid that fear, to help with that process, it's often very useful to have a mediator who can help in the middle, someone who is trusted by both sides. That person can protect both the person seeking for forgiveness and the person who is giving forgiveness. For both, fear is the greatest obstacle. The person who is seeking forgiveness, the mediator can help by ensuring that the person they're seeking forgiveness from doesn't take the opportunity to crush them, to humiliate them. By ensuring that that person's response is respectful. Even if it's not totally forgiving, at least it's respectful. And The mediator can protect the person giving forgiveness, the person who's actually forgiving, by ensuring that the apology is genuine and it's real and it's heartfelt. But that person is not, because the fear for the, we'll talk about this tomorrow, but the fear for the person who is offering forgiveness is often, who is forgiving, is often, in the name of forgiveness, will this person hurt me again? That's what's going on in their mind. I don't even want to let this person come close to me. He's just going to hurt me again. And the mediator can help by saying, look, I'm going to make sure that that doesn't happen. That this is a genuine exchange. And so we find in Srimad Bhagavatam that in very difficult situations of apology, there's so often a mediator who's present, who brings both sides together. So with Indra and Krishna, the mediator in the middle was
Surabhi.
Indra trusts Surabhi. She's a cow who lives in the heavenly planets. Indra knows her. And Krishna loves cows. So both sides trust. And Indra feels safe in making the apology. When he comes forward, he's less worried. I mean, Bhagavatam doesn't describe this, but the Vrajavasi stories talk about how he's crawling behind Surabhi, holding Surabhi's tail, in the hope that Krishna will not be so angry that he burns up Indra with his anger. Right? He's preventing that, because he wouldn't do that to Surabhi. He's protecting himself. He's the one who has to ask forgiveness. He knows that, but he still wants to protect himself. So he comes with Surabhi. If you look at the situation between Daksha and Shiva, that apology is arranged by the mediator, that is Brahma. Brahma comes to Lord Shiva and says, it's been long enough, forgive Daksha. And it's in response to that Shiva says, it's okay, actually I don't have anything against him, really, honestly, I don't. And Daksha is able to recover his place again, and his sense of dignity. We find in the story of Dhruva and the Yakshas. You remember that? The Yakshas kill Dhruva's younger brother Uttam. Dhruva is really angry, and he goes off to slaughter the Yakshas. Not just the one who killed Uttam, but all of them. He's so angry. And there again, is it Brahma or Swayambhuva Manu? Swayambhuva Manu. Swayambhuva Manu comes there and calms everyone down and tells Dhruva and helps him recognize that he's going too far. In the story of the Prachetas are burning the trees to the ground. They've covered the earth while they've been meditating. They have to rule. They need a place for human habitation. They get upset. They're ready to burn all the trees down. Every single last one of them. And again, Brahma comes and says, Prachetas, please calm down. This is not appropriate what you're doing. You're going too far. You need to create some space. Yes, you need to cut down some trees, but don't burn down every tree. And you, he says to the trees, you make amends with them. And why don't you offer your daughter in marriage to the Prachetas? This is a good match. And he arranges a family relationship between them to ensure that that animosity doesn't take place anymore. So now they see nature as members of their own family, as persons, not as resources to be exploited and used and burned to the ground. Again and again we find that in the most difficult cases of apology, there's often a mediator there, someone in the middle who's trusted. And this can be a very valuable service for those of us who may not be involved in a situation, but are observing it. Our willingness to come forward and to assist by serving as a mediator. Not forcing people to the table, but being available when they are ready for that to happen. It's a seva, and it's not an easy seva, because, you know, people shoot the messenger also. The mediator gets caught in between also. Where you're taking sides, how's this? What do you mean? It can be a challenge. So it's a risk. It's also a seva. It's a difficult seva. The mediator is not just someone who's got it easy and, you know, they can also get caught in the crossfire. I'm sure for Surabhi, it was a challenge also. To be between two people so angry, or who were so angry. So it's a very nice seva, and a very helpful one as well. Okay, the very last question. What if, despite going through all these steps and trying our very best, forgiveness is not forthcoming? Sometimes we have to ask forgiveness once. Sometimes when we ask forgiveness, that person is not ready to forgive. They've been pained, they've been hurt too much. Perhaps they have been hurt by others and things have piled up a lot. It's not just us. There are other factors involved too. So they're not ready to forgive or to reestablish the relationship. So sometimes we might have to ask forgiveness a second time or a third time in a different way, in a different approach. Sometimes we follow these steps and we speak our apology. Maybe a second time we try by trying to normalize the relationship, inviting them home, giving them prasadam, giving them a gift. We can try in different ways. Remember that we never become smaller, we never become weaker by apologizing. We always become greater, we always become stronger by doing it. If we have to do it again, we can do it again and again. I remember once being in a situation where I had to seek apology, and the person who was arranging this, I told them, I said, I've already done it. I've really apologized sincerely. And they said, okay, do it again. I said, I've actually already done it 3 times. One by letter, and then one in person, and one more time. I said, okay, do it a 4th time. That's what they're asking for. And each time, it becomes more empowering, it becomes more relieving, and we grow stronger as a result of that. When do we know when enough is enough? When do we know when we have done our part in seeking apology, and that's sufficient? Because at some point, enough is enough. At some point, we have done our part, and the ball is in their court. So maybe that's once, maybe that's twice, maybe it's 3 times. But when is it enough? This is where it's so useful to consult our Gurujan. That is, those people who we regard as our guides, mentors, seniors, our teachers. This is exactly why we need the shelter of spiritual master and spiritual masters. Remember, there are many spiritual masters, Diksha, but also Shiksha, rules. If they are satisfied, and obviously if they're not involved in the situation themselves, if they're involved in the situation, then we have to find someone else. But if they are satisfied with that apology, then we can, okay, I've done what I can. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but I did. That's the only shelter we have. That's the only measure we have. Using ourselves as a measure is really risky. Because if we could, we would justify it so much that we never needed to do an apology in the first place. Using our friends as measures is also kind of risky. We hang out with them, they confirm us, we confirm them. And we can create a little group that just confirms each other and develops this us versus them mentality. This is why we need to consult someone who's outside the situation, who is our well-wisher, and yet not invested in seeing one party succeed or lose. Someone whose wisdom we trust. And if that person, it's always nice to consult more than one person. You get a good spectrum and of understandings. And we can, that way, understand where we're at. 3 people will say, it's enough. The 4th person will say, maybe once more. Right? We kind of get our sense of where we're at. But if they're generally satisfied, then we know, okay, Krishna is satisfied. It's okay. That's the only measure I have. I've done my bit, and now I have to wait. I have to wait for Krishna to do his magic. I have to wait for them to respond in the way they want. But now I've done my bit. And I can sleep peacefully. I can rest with a light heart, rather than with that Sudarshan Chakra chasing me behind me. Okay, so these are the steps that we discussed. We talked about how do we know when we need forgiveness. We talked about why we should not worry too much about whether we're asking forgiveness about more than what we need, or in a situation where we don't necessarily think we have to ask, that the process itself will make us stronger. We talked about the importance of doing it as swiftly as we can, and to not letting things fester, like Jen Vijay did it swiftly. And then we talked about 4 steps for forgiveness, for seeking forgiveness. Appreciating the other person, recognizing our mistake, which included a specific statement of wrongdoing, no conditions, or ifs and buts, except for clarification of intent, and a suggestion for a remedy, a pathway forward, a way we can make recompense for what we've done. 3rd step is feeling genuinely remorseful within our hearts, which is not the same thing as asking an apology. And the 4th is ensuring that there's a change in our behavior so it doesn't happen again. And finally, we talked about fear as one of the greatest obstacles to this process, and how a mediator can really help in ensuring that both sides are respected and treated well in forgiveness. And finally, when do we know that we've done what we need to do? I will stop there. Thank you so much for listening to that. And now at this point, we have a little bit of time left over. We're right according to schedule. So if there are comments, questions, thoughts to share from this part or the previous part, since we didn't have time after that, please go ahead. Yes.
So thank you very much for explaining from different perspective. So it becomes now easier to follow that. First thing is because it is good for us. So my question now related to this is like why Indra does this Bhagavatam possesses so many incidences.
Yeah, why does Indra do this again and again? Because he's normal. And anyone who makes a mistake once in their lifetime and never does it again, that person is extraordinary. And that person is practically superhuman.
But you see the examples like Raman Maharaj and others, like they are so totally different. And Indra is also a devotee of the Lord, and they are also devotees of the Lord. But their character is completely different than him.
Yeah, Indra and other demigods like him are devotees who they are sakam bhaktas. They are doing devotional service for some personal benefit that they're getting. By worshiping Krishna and praying to him, he can ensure that my kingdom, my home, my position is all protected and secure. In that way, he's like many of us. Right? We come to Krishna and we worship him with the expectation that Krishna is going to help me in this, this, and this. Sometimes that's very obvious, like we put some money in the hundi and ask Krishna for money back. Other times it's more subtle, right? We worship Krishna and we say, I've been worshiping you for so many years, why are you doing this to me? Right? It's the same expectation, but at a higher level, and a more subtle level. That the result of devotional service should be that I have a good life, that I have no problems, right? That Krishna helps me with this, this, or this. So in this way, our bhakti is so often sakam bhakti, either at a gross level or at a very high level, but nevertheless it is. The demigods are different levels of sakam bhaktas. Some very kind of obvious, like Indra, please protect my kingdom, or in a very high or very subtle way of protecting position or prestige or one's intelligence, like Brahma. Right? He had this desire to kind of test Krishna using his intelligence and see how Krishna responds. Right? So this can be different types, different levels, but in general, when we have sakam, when we have desire in our hearts for personal gain, then we're going to commit mistakes. Because when that desire is what prompts us to do things that end up trampling over someone else. And that's why we do it. Or we make those mistakes, is because we're eager for something for ourselves. That drives us in that direction. Sometimes it can be purely accidental, like in the case of Jai and Vijay. But often, if that desire is there in the heart for personal gain, that can be the prompt that leads to it. And because Indra has that, therefore, he ends up in situations over and over again of committing mistakes. Again, not unlike us, where we too end up making mistakes over and over again. But here's the good thing, that each time we go through this process, if we go through this process that we just discussed, we are purified, we advance. The nature of our mistakes gets better. We learn from one set of mistakes and we come to realize, oh yeah, I'm not doing that again. So then the next time we make a mistake that's a little more advanced. It's a more elevated mistake. Like Maharaj Bharat, right? His mistake was really elevated. What was his mistake? He thought, Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam, I am the friend of all living beings. This person has no shelter but me. That's a much more advanced mistake than Indra's mistake, which is what? That I'm the proprietor of everything. I'm the owner. Bhoktaram Yajatapasa. Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. That was his. Right? But Bharat Maharaj's was more subtle. It was more advanced. Right? It was much, much better. So, yes, we do it over and over again. But each time we learn, even Indra learns. Each time he does this, he learns something from that process. And he gets better at it. He gets better at it.
Or we can look at it as it's an example for us. How do we take it?
Yeah, of course, everything in Bhagavatam is an example for us.
Yes, that's true. But they're real examples. It's not fake examples. What I mean to say is that Krishna, when he orchestrates a Leela, it's not that everyone's just pretending to teach us. These are real devotees with real challenges and real issues. And so Krishna orchestrates everything to help them advance and to help us learn. Both. He does both at the same time.
But when we say in Bhagavad Gita, right, that Bhagavad Gita is not meant for Arjuna, it is meant for us, because otherwise Krishna cannot be his Parthasara. Because Arjuna is a devotee, he became his Parthasara. So how do we apply that?
Yes. Yeah, sometimes Krishna can take a devotee and specifically put them into a difficult circumstance to teach us. Right? But even as Krishna does this, he never fakes anything. He never fakes anything. Everything Arjun did was a real response to the situations of the Mahabharata. Right? Like this is, in other words, it is, both things are true. Krishna arranges everything in the lives of his devotees to teach the world. And what's happening in the lives of the devotees is real. And they are truly experiencing it. Both things are true. It is, Krishna never does fake dramas. He never fakes anything. He's always real in everything. He just is very expert at doing multiple things at once. Right? He'll, as Kurma, he'll bring the demigods and the demons together and let them fight out their anger, their family feud. He will ensure that the demigods get the nectar which allows them to be powerful. And he gets his back scratched as the mountain moves. So he does all of it. And it's not that the back scratching negates the real experience that Indra and everyone else is going through and what they're learning. It's just that Krishna does it all at once. Right? He does it all at once. Arjun's anguish is real. Krishna may have arranged it. He did. We know he did. But Arjun is truly in anguish at that point in Bhagavad Gita. And his situation is the reason we identify so much with this situation is because it's real. It's real. From the time of Hamlet to the present day, we all find ourselves in Arjuna's situation. To lesser degrees, but nevertheless, that same quandary. How do I do my duty and carry on my loyalties, my affections, my attachments? How do I do two conflicting duties at the same time? Yes.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. I have two questions, Prabhuji. The first question is, with respect to practical real life, when we have asked forgiveness 3 or 4 or 5 times beyond that, and that person says, you know what, the relationship is, that's it. We don't want to pursue further. Should we take it as Krishna giving us that impetus to say, okay, this is it. Maybe we don't need to pursue that. And my second question is, when usually people say, oh, if they did something, rise above the occasion, right? And you say, oh, I'm better than. Would it be treated as like, I am full of pride, thinking that, oh, I have to rise above the occasion, so I'm better than a person?
Yeah, thank you. Very, very good questions. With your the second part to your question first, when someone wrongs us, do we have to rise above the occasion? So this is the main topic for tomorrow, when we talk about what do we do in a situation where we have been wronged? How do we forgive? I'll just say this much, and I'll repeat this again tomorrow, which is that forgiving someone does not mean that we do not recognize what they have done wrong, that we forget it, that we ignore it, that we pretend it's not there, that we just transcend it. No. The only way to forgive is when we recognize that something wrong has been done. How can you forgive something if you don't even think it's wrong? right? It doesn't make any sense. Forgiveness can only happen when we recognize that something wrong has been done, number one. And number two, forgiveness does not mean that we allow that person to continue to harm us. Neither thing is connected to forgiveness. We make that's often a misunderstanding of what forgiveness is. Just rise above it, meaning forget about it. No. Forgiveness means recognizing that something wrong has been done, that what this person did is not right. And still, I will forgive them. Or because of that, I will forgive them. Because I know what they did is wrong, I will forgive them. And secondly, that just because I am forgiving them doesn't mean that I allow them to commit it again and again, to continue to harm me. Neither one is required in terms of forgiveness. Okay? But we'll talk about this more in detail tomorrow. That whole side of the equation is how we forgive. Your first part?
My first question was, like, if we have asked repeated
Oh yes,
forgiveness.
yes, I remember. So if we ask repeatedly and that person says, no, I think it's over, then it's over. Then, what can we do? We tried our best, and at that point, then we say, okay, this is a relationship can only happen with two people, two directions. Okay? If one person says, nope, it's over, then it is actually over. There's going to be no progress. Now, maybe they'll change their mind in the future, but we don't have control over that. All we have control over is our own response. Right? So, let's go.
Guru, I have a question from your previous session.
Yeah.
You talked about how Krishna can forgive our intention and sometimes action, is not appropriate. In that context, you talked about how Krishna may not forgive if it is a Vaishnava Aparadha. Because he cannot forgive on behalf of somebody else.
Yeah.
So my question here is then why are we giving so much importance only on Vaishnava Aparadha? I mean, then even for non-Vaishnava Aparadhas should not be forgiven, right? So,
Yes, you're right. I mean to say, this raises a very important question. So that what counts as Vaishnava Aparadha? If you give this some thought, it's not clear what's exactly Vaishnava Aparadha and what's non-Vaishnava Aparadha. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is in Jagannath Puri and the residents of Kulinagram come to him and ask him this question, who is a Vaishnava? Then the first answer he gives is, anyone who chants the holy name once is a Vaishnava. Which at that time in India meant everyone, right? I mean, who was there who had never said Hari or Narayan or Krishna or Vishnu? Everyone had, more or less. And then the next year he's asked, and he clarifies that further. And he says, anyone who is constantly chanting Krishna's holy names is a Vaishnava. Then he's asked a third time, and he says, anyone whose very presence makes others chant Hare Krishna is a Vaishnava. So, who is a Vaishnava? Right? It's not a question of an on-off switch, yes or no. It's really just a question of intensity, of degree. Second point is, if you remember the story of Dhruva and Uttam, and Suniti and Suruchi. Suruchi ends up, in the end of the story, ends up getting burnt by a forest fire as she's looking for her son Uttam. And it says there in the purport that Suruchi ended up getting a reaction for offending Dhruva because he became a pure devotee later on in the future. I mean to say, she was getting a heavy reaction for offending a future Vaishnava. Because at that point, he was just a kid, and he was as materially motivated as Uttam was, or anyone else, right?
But eventually he was going to become a pure devotee. Now, who does that leave out? Who's the non-Vaishnava then? If we can end up committing Vaishnava aparadh for future Vaishnavas, then that dog we kicked could be a future Vaishnava. So my point is that ultimately, the reality is that when we as Vaishnavas, we develop a character of respect for others, why will we turn it on in a temple and turn it off outside the temple? This becomes our character, right? It's not that a devotee is constantly thinking, well, this person could be a Vaishnava, maybe in the future, I better be careful here. Their character is such that in every situation, they act in a respectful and a humble and a tolerant way. And that doesn't turn off for a devotee when we engage at work or when we engage on the street or when we're out hiking or whatever. It's always on, right? This is our nature. This is who we are. So we need to cultivate that as our nature. And once it's our nature, it's always there. And if it's not our nature, then it'll happen in the temple also, right? If it happens outside, it'll happen in the temple. There's no one who has been successful at being terrible outside and being a complete, sadhu in the temple. It always comes out, right? What we are outside will percolate on the inside, and what we are on the inside will percolate on the outside.
Also there is one other aspect, right? As long as the super soul is inside, so he's a Vaishnava.
Yes.
Right? Everybody is a Vaishnava for that matter.
Yeah.
That's how we always think, right? I mean, you treat the other person as the God because the super soul is there.
Yes.
Right? Other aspect, what I'm asking is how the karma acts in the act of forgiveness from the forgiver point of view or the
Yes.
forgiven point of view. So they cancel each other the karma.
This is a full topic. 5 to 7 minutes tomorrow. We'll address exactly this question.
I also want to add one point to the art of forgiveness. So you should not be showy.
The forgiveness.
Seeking forgiveness or the person. You should not put the other person usually in the embarrassment stage. I mean, going all the time before the other person in front of 100 people is not going to help us.
Yes.
Right? So the
Yes.
embarrassment should be avoided.
That's a very nice point. In the Parikshit and Shringi story, the question Prabhupada raises in the purport is, why didn't Parikshit Maharaj go to ask Shamik Rishi for forgiveness? Why didn't he go to ask for forgiveness? Shamik Rishi actually wrote a letter to Maharaj Parikshit, sent a message to him. I don't know if it was written or verbal, but he sent a message to him, informing him about the curse and seeking his forgiveness. Parikshit Maharaj, despite his repentance, did not go to meet Shamik Rishi because of this point. That he knew Shamik Rishi was so remorseful and so pained by what had happened that he didn't want to go just to make him fall at his feet and to embarrass him further and to see. In other words, even though Parikshit Maharaj had committed a mistake, the response was so out of proportion. It was so terrible, the curse for 7 days, that now the tables had turned. Shamik Rishi was far more repentant and Shringi. They were just demolished, actually, with their sense of remorse. That going there again would have been rubbing it in, or adding insult to that injury, because they would have had to come face to face with the person that they had just killed, almost, right? That they had cursed to die in 7 days. So preserving the dignity of the other person. We'll talk about this also tomorrow.
Is that forgiving is always one person needs to keep on forgiving the other person that will always do mistakes? Is there a point somewhere we have to say, no, this is it?
Yeah, so as I was just mentioning in response to the earlier question,
Right.
forgiveness does not mean permission, giving permission for that person to continue their behavior.
Yeah, that for real life scenarios.
This is where we're going to start tomorrow.
Yeah. So the story goes whether she always saves the scorpion keeps on singing. So that should not happen, right?
Yes.
One need not be a sage all the time, the other person not yours.
Yes. Please come tomorrow. I think you'll appreciate it. Your questions are almost all about the other side.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thanks for the wonderful class. I have one comment quickly. I think Bhakti Tirtha Swami's book, I think one of the spiritual warrior books, he says, whenever there's a fault, always treat yourself as being totally at fault. And then give your enemy more love than you give your dearest loved one. My question is very quick and simple. So when Jesus is crucified, he, I think, prays to God and says, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. So can you comment on that?
Yeah. So wonderful question, especially because today is, or tomorrow is,
Easter.
Yesterday was Good Friday. So it's nice we can glorify Jesus Christ. This is, of course, one of the stellar examples of forgiveness in human history is Jesus' willingness and determination to forgive those who are crucifying him. By asking the Lord to please forgive them, what is he telling the Lord? He's saying, I forgive them. That I have no, because Krishna cannot forgive unless the devotee is ready to forgive. He could not forgive Durvasa Muni until Ambarish Maharaj said yes. When Ambarish Maharaj, when Durvasa came and fell at his feet, Ambarish Maharaj prayed to Sudarshan. And there's beautiful prayers there, very nice. Sahasrara Namastubhyam. Oh, you with 1,000 spokes, please be kind to this poor Brahmin. Don't burn him anymore. And that's when Krishna or Sudarshan could forgive. Okay. So, by asking the Lord, please forgive them, for they know not what they do, he's telling the Lord, I forgive them. You please forgive them as well. Let go of your anger towards them. This is what Prahlad Maharaj does with his father. In telling Hiranyakashipu, please liberate this person, he says, this is to the earlier point about forgiveness does not mean being blind to a person's mistakes. Prahlad Maharaj specifically says that my father was like a snake, and the whole world is rejoicing at his death because he put so many people into suffering. It's a famous verse where he says even saintly people are rejoicing at his death. Right? So he's recognizing that my father was a horrible person and did all this wrong. And yet, he says, please liberate him because he was my father and I still care for him. And what does he do in saying that? He gives Krishna permission to protect Hiranyakashipu and to favor him. So it's very nice. Prabhupada gives Jesus as an example repeatedly of someone who exhibits Vaishnava compassion. Whenever Prabhupada quotes this verse from Bhagavatam, Titikshava Karunika, that line specifically, Titikshava Karunika, tolerant and merciful. Almost always, when Prabhupada quotes that beautiful verse from Bhagavatam, he will mention Jesus as the example of that. And then, right after Jesus, he will mention who?
Prahlad Maharaj.
Haridas Thakur. Who's actually Prahlad. So, yeah. I'll just go to Gopika, and Prabhu has been waiting up here for quite some time. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you so much. It's so nice to have you back after so long. So my question is, you spoke about the importance of feeling genuine remorse as part of the apology. And you also spoke about how low self-esteem is different than real humility and not going too much like I'm so bad, I'm so worthless. So from your perspective, what's the balance between feeling genuine remorse but not dipping into the low self-esteem? Because, in psychology and mental health perspective, it's a skill for good mental health to be able to speak to oneself kindly, to show oneself understanding, because when we do that for ourselves, we can actually do it for others. So, but when you think about feeling genuine remorse, it kind of conflicts with the idea of, you know, showing understanding to yourself or speaking to yourself kindly. So what's your perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. I, um, I think the key word there is genuine. When the remorse is genuine, then I think just like the humility, that remorse is limited to what the cause for remorse is, right? So that we're not remorseful for being who we are. We're not remorseful for being human. We're remorseful for the specific, we're repentant for the specific mistake that we made. But then that's why that fourth step is so important. And I think one of the things that fourth step does, the commitment to change, is in the final instance then changes the internal narrative from being one of focus on the past and focus on one's shortcomings, which can become endless and lead to self-flagellation and low self-esteem. And it shifts the narrative to then talking about the future and how we can be constructive in terms of improving ourselves, right? So that the fourth step is so crucial because it is a hopeful step. It's saying, how do we move forward? How do we move forward in the relationship? How do we move forward in my own life? That what can I learn and grow and build and pick up from this and then move on successfully, right? So thank you for bringing up that point, because that fourth step, which I talk very little about actually, is, I think, especially useful because it is hopeful, it is forward-facing. If we end with the third step, which is the remorse, then we can often wallow in it and not be able to pull ourselves out. Pariksha's example is very relevant in this case because he feels that sense of repentance, and I quoted that line where Prabhupada says that the fire of repentance burns away the sins in the heart of a devotee. And so he genuinely felt remorse. And yet, for him, the next step was, okay, what do I do now? And for him, it meant, let me take control of my life and do something of it is going to be worthwhile and will grow me and will be powerful. And so he then makes a decision to leave home, go to the banks of the Ganga, and listen to Bhagavatam for 7 days, and does the most glorious thing possible after that repentance, or as a result of that, right? So that's that fourth step, which we find that in all these stories of seeking forgiveness, the devotee ends up going back to their position or doing even better, right? So Daksha, for example, feels genuine remorse, then goes back, becomes Prajapati Daksha again, finishes the sacrifice that he was originally planning to do, and continues to grow as a person and do wonderful things in the Bhagavatam. Same thing with Indra. Like, he offers his remorse, he feels repentant, and then he goes back again and continues to be a ruler of heaven. So that fourth step, I think, we don't want to end there. We don't want to stop there. Without repentance, we end up becoming very callous as human beings. This is who I am. It doesn't really matter what the consequences of my actions are. And of course, we don't want that. But then if we stop there, that can have the problematic effect that you were referring to, where we end up ceasing to become kind to ourselves. Does that help? Up here, Yasoda-dulal.
Thank you, Prabhu. Wonderful seminars. I was thinking about, you said at the end, like the final step, when do we know enough is enough? Have we approached a Shiksha Guru or some friend who is not just an echo chamber, but actually will give us sage advice for our own good? And I was thinking, our tendency is typically that we want to present our best side in front of people, especially our Shiksha gurus and Diksha guru. So it's very hard to go to them and say, I really screwed up. And I messed up and I've apologized and it didn't work. And then reveal the truth that this is what I really did wrong. So how do we overcome that? Or same thing with friends. Like, how do we overcome that and actually have at least 1 or 2 or 3 relationships where we have these avenues to go and consult?
It's so really important to have in our lives at least a few people, 1, 2, 3 people, 4 in our life in front of whom we can be genuinely ourselves. And when we go to them, we can, if they tell us that you've done something wrong, you really should, fix this. We know it's coming from a genuine place. They're not trying to beat us down and break us apart. Or if they give us praise, that we know that praise is genuine. They're not flattering us. They're not trying to use us. That we can actually give ourselves a pat on the back. Right? Those types of genuine relationships are crucial. And if we don't have the capacity to go to someone and share what it is that we're going through, then we have to really examine our life and ask ourselves, why? Why don't I have such people in my life? And what can I do about that? Because that's just such an important part of being a healthy human being, but also in terms of having genuine Vaishnava relationships, like that aspect of Guhyam Akyati Gachati. It's the foundation of loving relationships. I remember asking Sachinandan Swami once, how do I maintain humility? And his answer was exactly this. He said, those people most successful in their lives, in any field, are those who always have a few people from whom you can take praise or criticism because you know it comes from a genuine place. And no matter who you become and how great you become in the eyes of others, ensuring that those relationships are always there in your life is the key to maintaining humility and balance. And here we see what he meant by humility. Someone who is who can be honest with who we are. Right? Many people are ready to make us humble by telling us all our bad qualities. That's not what he meant. Right? These are people who are honest with us, and we can be honest with them. So it's a project. Right? This is if we have this, we have a great treasure in our lives, and if we don't, we have to seek it. We have to look for it. It's 7 o'clock.
Yes.
I think it's time for Aarti.
Yes, I think the curtains will be opening shortly. We'll have Aarti. Wonderful questions. Just want to let everybody know, tomorrow we will be starting sharp at 2 p.m. So please come on time at 2 p.m. so that we can have the last session of the seminar. It's been a wonderful seminar already. And, tomorrow is also another very valuable day. Just also want to ask if anyone would like to sponsor towards the cost of the seminar, prasad, the travel, etc. You can sponsor any amount you like and just let us know, and we will be happy to take your sponsorship. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Great thanks to